God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." These words, spoken by a woman who lived nearly 4,000 years ago, echo through the centuries as a testimony of faith, hope, and divine power that transcends human limitations. The story we'll share today isn't just about a woman who gave birth at an advanced age. It's a journey that challenges our understanding of time, promise, and divine purpose. A narrative that makes us question, what happens when God's plans seem impossible to human eyes? And how do we react when divine timing seems out of sync with our expectations? Sarah, Abraham's wife, lived a life marked by profound contradictions. A woman of extraordinary beauty, yet unable to generate life. A matriarch destined to be the mother of nations, but whose womb remained barren for decades. A woman who laughed in disbelief at a divine promise, only to later laugh with joy when the impossible became reality. Join us in this exploration of Sarah's life, where we'll discover how her journey of faith, with all its complexities and imperfections, continues to illuminate our understanding of God's nature and His relationship with humanity. Before she was known as Sarah, she was Sarai, a name meaning "my princess." Scripture introduces this woman first as Abram's wife in Genesis 11 verse 29, where we read, "Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah." This brief introduction hides a painful reality revealed in the next verse. "And Sarai was barren, she had no child." In these few words lies a personal tragedy of immense proportions. In the culture of the ancient Middle East, barrenness wasn't just a medical condition. It was a sentence of social shame, a sign of divine disfavor, an identity marked by absence. But who was this woman beyond her condition? Jewish tradition suggests that Sarai was not only beautiful, but of extraordinary beauty. Some scholars believe she was Haran's daughter and therefore Abram's niece, though Scripture doesn't explicitly confirm this relationship. What we know for certain is that she was born in Ur of the Chaldeans, a sophisticated Mesopotamian city where moon worship was predominant. Imagine the cultural shock when her husband Abram announces that he received a call from an invisible God, commanding them to abandon everything they knew. Genesis 12 verse 1 records, "The Lord had said to Abram, 'Go from your country, your people, and your father's household, to the land I will show you.'" Although the call was directed to Abram, Sarai was intrinsically linked to this destiny. Without prior consultation, without security guarantees, she found herself uprooted from her hometown, from her extended family, from everything familiar. The biblical text records no protests or hesitations on her part, only silent obedience, following her husband toward the unknown. This journey wasn't merely geographical, but spiritual. Sarai was leaving behind not just a city, but an entire belief system, an entire worldview. Abram's God was radically different from Mesopotamian deities. He had no image, wasn't limited to a temple, and made promises of universal scope. And what promises were these? Genesis 12 verses 2 and 3 reveal, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." But how could Abram become a great nation if his wife was barren? How could his name be made great without an heir to carry his legacy? This fundamental contradiction establishes the dramatic tension that will permeate Sarai's entire narrative. She carried in her apparently infertile body the future of divine promises. As they journeyed toward Canaan, did Sarai understand the magnitude of the divine plan she was now part of? Did she imagine that her womb, which had remained empty for so long, would be the channel through which God would fulfill an eternal purpose? Or was she, like so many of us, simply trying to survive one day at a time, navigating the uncertainties of an uprooted life? What we know is that this initial journey would test not only her faith, but also her dignity and identity. For soon after arriving in the Promised Land, a severe famine would force them to seek refuge in Egypt, where the first great moral test of her story would be faced. Sarai's beauty, mentioned in ancient traditions, is dramatically confirmed as the couple approaches Egypt. Genesis 12 verse 11 reveals, "As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, 'I know what a beautiful woman you are.' When this beauty, which in another context would be cause for celebration, becomes a source of mortal danger. Abram, fearing for his own life, proposes a disconcerting plan. 'Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you.' Observe Sarai's profound vulnerability in this moment. She isn't consulted about this plan. She's instructed. Her beauty, an attribute over which she had no control, becomes simultaneously her greatest threat and her only protection. In a culture where women had little autonomy, Sarai finds herself reduced to an object of transaction between powerful men. What follows is a sequence of disturbing events. Exactly as Abram predicted, Pharaoh's officials notice Sarai's extraordinary beauty and take her to the royal palace. Genesis 12 verse 15 reports, "And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace." The biblical text is remarkably economical in its description, but the implications are clear. Sarai, now separated from her husband and taken to the harem of a foreign monarch, faces the prospect of becoming Pharaoh's wife or concubine. Meanwhile, Abram prospers materially. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. This passage raises deeply uncomfortable questions. Abram, the man called by God, seems willing to compromise his wife's dignity to ensure his own survival. Sarai, in turn, remains silent. We have no record of her words, her thoughts, her feelings during this ordeal. What we know is that God intervenes directly. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. This divine intervention reveals something fundamental. Although Abram failed to protect his wife, God did not abandon her. Even when the men in her life treated her as dispensable, the Creator demonstrated that she was indispensable in His plan. Confronted with the truth, Pharaoh rebukes Abram and expels him from Egypt, along with Sarai and all their possessions. They return to Canaan materially richer, but with emotional and spiritual scars that the text doesn't explore. This experience in Egypt establishes a pattern we'll see repeated. Years later, in Gerar, Abram, now called Abraham, will use the same stratagem with King Abimelech, placing Sarai, now Sarah, at risk again. Once more, God intervenes to protect her. What do these experiences reveal about Sarah? They show a woman living in circumstances where her autonomy was severely limited, where her beauty was simultaneously a gift and a curse, where her identity was primarily defined by her relationships with men. And yet, through these trials, we see the first signs that God had a specific purpose for her, a purpose that transcended her role as Abraham's wife. But as Sarah navigated these turbulent waters of vulnerability and objectification, one question remained unanswered. How could this woman, whose body had been treated as property, become the vessel through which the divine promise of descendants would be fulfilled? 10 years had passed since Abram and Sarai arrived in the land of Canaan. 10 years of nomadism, of building altars to the Lord, of accumulating wealth, but also 10 years of an empty womb. The divine promise of offspring remained suspended in the air, seemingly contradicted by Sarai's biological reality. In Genesis 15, God renews his covenant with Abram in a solemn ceremony, promising him descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. But note that Sarai isn't mentioned in this covenant renewal. Was she present? Did she hear these renewed promises? Or was she in her tent, facing the daily reality of her barrenness while her husband received cosmic visions? What we know is that after a decade of waiting, Sarai takes the initiative. Genesis 16 verses 1 and 2 records. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. But she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Sarai's proposal reveals much about her psychology and theology. First, she interprets her barrenness as a direct action of God. The Lord has kept me from having children. Second, she seeks a cultural solution to a spiritual problem. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was common practice for a barren wife to offer a servant as a surrogate to bear children. Third, notice the phrase, "I can build a family." Sarai sees motherhood, even by proxy, as something that would build her up, that would establish her identity and value. Abram agrees to the plan without hesitation. Hagar conceives quickly, and the text tells us that when she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. The power dynamic between the two women is reversed. Hagar, previously subordinate, now possesses something her mistress desperately desires: proven fertility. Sarai's reaction is human and understandable. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me." Note that Sarai blames Abram, not Hagar, for the situation. She sees Hagar's attitude as an affront to herself, but holds her husband responsible for allowing it to happen. Abram's response is revealing. "Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best." He absolves himself of responsibility, returning control over Hagar to Sarai. What follows is a cycle of oppression. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. In the desert, Hagar encounters the angel of the Lord, who instructs her to return and submit to Sarai, but also promises her that her son, who shall be called Ishmael, will have numerous descendants. Hagar returns, and Ishmael is born when Abram is 86 years old. This attempt to help God fulfill his promise through human means would have lasting consequences. The relationship between Sarai and Hagar is permanently damaged. Ishmael, though loved by Abram, is not the son of promise. And Sarai, far from being built up by this surrogate motherhood, seems even more marginalized. 13 years pass. Ishmael grows. Abram is now 99 years old, and Sarai 89. From a human perspective, the biological window for motherhood is definitely closed. It's at this moment, when all human possibilities have been exhausted, that God chooses to act. But before the promise is fulfilled, a significant change occurs. God appears again to Abram and renews his covenant, this time with a physical sign: circumcision. And along with this new covenant come new names. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. And as for Sarai your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. This name change is deeply significant. From Sarai, my princess, to Sarah, princess, there is an expansion of identity. She is no longer defined solely by her relationship with a man, but receives a title that recognizes her intrinsic dignity. And more importantly, for the first time, God addresses her directly as a beneficiary of the promise: I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. God also said to Abraham, "As for Sarai your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. And these words, recorded in Genesis 17 verses 15 and 16, mark a fundamental shift in Sarah's narrative. For the first time, she is not just Abraham's wife, but a direct recipient of divine promises. God doesn't merely promise that she will have a son, but that she will become the mother of nations and kings. Abraham's reaction is revealing. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? His laughter is not of joy, but of incredulity. The promise seems biologically impossible, contrary to the laws of nature as he knows them. Abraham even suggests an alternative. And Abraham said to God, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." It's as if he's saying, "God, we already have a working solution. Ishmael is here. He's my son. Why not work with what we already have?" But God is insistent. "Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac." The name Isaac, which means "he laughs," will eternalize this moment of incredulity transformed into joy. God doesn't reject Ishmael. He promises to bless him too, but makes it clear that the eternal covenant will be established with Isaac, the son who will be born to Sarah. Shortly thereafter, one of the most extraordinary encounters in Scripture occurs. Abraham is sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day, when 3 visitors appear. He receives them with extravagant hospitality, not initially knowing that he is hosting divine manifestations. During this visit, the promise is reiterated, this time with Sarah as a direct witness. Genesis 18 verse 10 records, "Then one of them said, 'I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son.'" The text tells us that Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. She isn't directly participating in the conversation. She's eavesdropping, as was common for women in patriarchal cultures, and her reaction mirrors Abraham's. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Sarah's laughter is complex. It's partially incredulity. How could her aged body, which never produced life even in her fertile years, now bear a child? But there's also a note of bitterness, perhaps even cynicism. "Will I now have this pleasure?" she asks, suggesting that not just conception, but the conjugal act itself seemed implausible at her advanced age. The divine response is direct and challenging. Why did Sarah laugh and say, "Will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Confronted, Sarah denies, "I did not laugh." But the divine visitor insists, "Yes, you did laugh." This exchange reveals something profound about Sarah. Even in the divine presence, she tries to maintain control over her narrative, over her emotions. Her laughter, an honest response to an apparently absurd promise, becomes something she tries to hide. This scene shows us a Sarah who, despite decades of living with Abraham and her experiences with God, still struggles to believe in the impossible. Her laughter isn't just lack of faith. It's the honest recognition of the limits of human nature. How could she not laugh at a promise that contradicts everything she knows about biology, about her own body? And yet, what seems impossible to human eyes is precisely the stage where God chooses to act. Sarah's barrenness wasn't an obstacle to the divine plan. It was the perfect setting to demonstrate that new life comes not from human potential, but from God's creative power. A year passes. Sarah, now 90 years old, conceives and gives birth to a son. Genesis 21 verse 6 records her words, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." Her laughter of incredulity has transformed into laughter of joy. The same God who confronted her for laughing now gives her reasons to laugh, but in a completely different way. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." And she added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." These words of Sarah, recorded in Genesis 21 verses 6 and 7, reveal a profound transformation. The woman who once laughed in disbelief now invites others to laugh with her in celebration. The woman who questioned whether she would still have pleasure now experiences the supreme joy of motherhood. The woman whose name meant princess now truly becomes the matriarch of a royal lineage. Isaac's birth represents not just the fulfillment of a personal promise, but the beginning of a divine plan of universal scope. Through this miraculous son, born against all odds, God would begin to form the people through whom redemption would come to all humanity. But Sarah's joy is soon threatened. During Isaac's weaning celebration, an event that typically occurred when the child was between 2 and 3 years old, Sarah observes something disturbing. Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. The exact nature of this mocking isn't specified, but Sarah's reaction is immediate and severe. She said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." This demand causes great distress to Abraham, who loves Ishmael as his firstborn. The text tells us that the matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God intervenes, instructing Abraham to listen to Sarah. Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. This passage is often interpreted in contradictory ways. Some see Sarah as cruel and possessive, expelling a competitor and her son out of maternal jealousy. Others see her as deeply conscious of the divine plan, recognizing that Isaac, not Ishmael, was the son of promise. What is clear is that Sarah understands something fundamental. Isaac and Ishmael represent two different paths, two distinct covenants. As Paul would later interpret in Galatians 4, Hagar and Ishmael symbolize the covenant of law and slavery, while Sarah and Isaac represent the covenant of promise and freedom. By insisting on separation, Sarah isn't just protecting her son's material inheritance. She's preserving the integrity of the lineage through which God would fulfill his redemptive plan. Her action, though painful, is aligned with the divine purpose, as God himself confirms to Abraham. Hagar and Ishmael are sent into the desert with limited provisions. When the water runs out, Hagar places the boy under a bush and moves away so as not to see his death. But God intervenes again, showing Hagar a well of water and renewing his promise that Ishmael too will become a great nation. This resolution of the conflict reveals something important about God's character. Although he has chosen a specific lineage for his special covenant, his compassion extends to all. Ishmael is not the son of promise, but he is still Abraham's son, and God does not abandon him. After this episode, Sarah virtually disappears from the biblical narrative until her death. We know she lived to see Isaac grow, but we have no record of her words or actions during these years. What we know is that she died in Hebron at the age of 127, having lived long enough to see her miraculous son become a man. Abraham's reaction to her death is deeply moving. Genesis 23, verse 2, tells us that he went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. This man of faith, who had walked with God for decades, who had been willing to sacrifice his own son out of obedience, now finds himself in deep mourning for the loss of his life companion. Abraham negotiates the purchase of the cave of Machpelah as a burial place for Sarah, paying an exorbitant price to ensure she has a permanent resting place in the Promised Land. This final act of devotion suggests the deep respect and love he felt for her, despite the complexities of their relationship. Sarah dies without seeing the fullness of divine promises realized. She doesn't live to see Isaac married to Rebekah, nor to meet her grandsons Jacob and Esau. She doesn't witness the formation of the nation of Israel, nor the lineage of kings that would proceed from her. And certainly she doesn't glimpse the Messiah who would come through her lineage. And yet, her legacy is immense. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews includes her in the Hall of Fame of faith. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Sarah's story invites us to contemplate the divine mystery of time and promise. In a world obsessed with youth and immediate productivity, her life reminds us that God frequently operates not just beyond our expectations, but beyond our natural capacities. Sarah lived most of her life defined by an absence, the absence of children. But God transformed her emptiness into fullness, her barrenness into fertility, her laughter of doubt into laughter of joy. Through her, we learn that our human limitations are not obstacles for God. They are opportunities for His grace to manifest. As a matriarch of faith, Sarah teaches us that believing doesn't mean absence of doubts, but persistence despite them. Her journey wasn't one of moral or spiritual perfection, but of gradual transformation. From a passive woman, defined by others, she became an active participant in the divine plan, capable of discerning and defending her role in the history of redemption. In Sarah, we see the paradox of faith, the tension between promise and fulfillment, between waiting and realization, between the already and the not yet. And in this paradox, we find hope for our own journeys of faith.